Great to be here with you. I'm a little bit torn because I'm a basketball fan and I saw there was basketball playing behind me now, but now you just get to look at me, but I'll do the best I can. It's really nice to be able to join you all here at the Chieftain. Before I became the director of vocations, I used to be the pastor at St. Joseph in Issaquah, at which I started our own young adult group there too, and we also had Theology on Tap down at the local brew pub. It was a great time, the whole thing, so it's nice to be in the situation again as it is. I also, just for the full context, I'm also the part-time chaplain at Kennedy Catholic High School. We have an alumni there from Kennedy Catholic High School. Yes! Come back anytime and donate money. There it is. And then I'm also the parochial vicar at St. Mary's, which is in Seattle, with Bishop Eusebio, who's the pastor. And then weekends that I'm not at St. Mary's, I travel around the Archdiocese and I preach at different parishes on vocations, the priesthood, religious life, all that kind of thing. I've been to 130 different parishes of the Archdiocese on the weekend preaching on vocations. And I'm happy to say never once have I been there and been like, great to be here with you at St. Where am I? What's going on? I got all the names right all the time, so it's nice to be able to join you all here this evening. What I wanted to talk about this evening was talk about, for a moment, St. Francis and St. Dominic and their cultural context, what they were doing, what their life was about, and then move to Pope Francis on the joy of the gospel. For a gold star this evening, did anyone read The Joy of the Gospel, the entire 220-page document? There's like 1.5 back there. Good. You get you get some of my tater tots because of that. How about that? Yeah. And because I want to talk about the context of the new evangelization a little bit. It's always nice. I don't get many opportunities where I can drink a beer as I'm speaking, so I'm going to sample that as well. So St. Francis and St. Dominic, people know the main story. Some of you might even have a St. Francis statue in your garden, or your parents have one, or whatever might be the case. Both of them founded their religious orders in the early 1200s. So in the Middle Ages, when they were growing up, what was happening in the life of the church, and medieval kind of experience, was that people would go to church. The whole kind of European experience was basically Catholic. This was before the Protestant Reformation. You'd had some of the break with the Orthodox in the East, but in general, the clergy were there. Some were very good, were well-educated, but many were not well-educated, and some were very corrupt amongst the clergy in preaching the gospel. They weren't very good preachers of the gospel. And as you know, both St. Francis and St. Dominic were born into fairly wealthy families. And even though they were born into wealthy families, both of them decided to choose a radical lifestyle of living the gospel, which was not seen as a beneficial thing in society. Pope Francis, for those of you that have seen, I don't know, was it Brother, Sun, Sister Moon? I remember I watched that in college back when I was young, right? And he just walks away, right, like in the nude. He's like, I'm going to leave everything, right, and just go and like serve Christ and God's people and all this. It's a pretty dramatic scene. And all of his wealthy friends and neighbors, they're like, what is this guy doing? Is he crazy, or what's happening? And what's important to keep in mind for both of them is a few points. First, they were so consumed with the love of the risen Christ that they were really willing to give everything, right? They were so drawn in by their relationship to Christ and God's love that they were like, I'll do anything for you. Secondly, both of them decided that we need to do something different. What we're doing right now in the church is okay, and there were lots of faithful and holy people during the time of St. Francis, St. Dominic, but we need to do something different. We need to have some other new opportunity to be able to preach the gospel and be able to build up the church. During the time of St. Francis and St. Dominic, they are known as mendicant orders, the Dominicans and the Franciscans, which means that they're not monks, right? So during the time, in the medieval time, there was the monks, the Benedictines, and they were centers of learning and their prayer and all these things, but they stayed kind of inside, right? So people would come to them, the gift of hospitality. And then there were guys like me, diocesan priests, right? They were out in the parishes, and they're doing their thing, and various bishops, etc. But there was no in-between the monks and the diocesan priests. And so both St. Dominic and St. Francis, which is pretty incredible that they came about the same time, said we need to do something new and something original about how we're going to preach the gospel. St. Francis, as you know, lived a life of poverty, probably had that gift of voluntary poverty, and he invited the rest of his brothers who were serving with him to be able to embrace not only poverty, but be able to identify with Christ in the poor. Now, to be able to do that during that time was seen as also as countercultural. Actually be with lepers, be present to them physically. Many of you know some of the stories of St. Francis as well, where he was, at one point he was building this little church that was there because it had fallen in disrepair, and so he's building it, and he understood, he's like, oh, you're calling me to build your church. Not just this particular church, but you're calling me to rebuild your church together. Also that St. Francis is known to say that preach at all times and when necessary use words, right? So the Franciscans were going out trying to take care of the poor and saying, people, why are you doing this? Because we love Jesus this much, right? We're going to take care of the poor, we're going to live radical poverty, we're going to live our entire lives for Christ, and we're going to wear odd clothing, right? That's going to distinguish us from the rest of the people that you see in society. They're going to wear the habit, and then they have the 3 knots for the 3 vows that they're going to take. And dramatic shift of what St. Francis was able to do. St. Dominic, you may know less of St. Dominic because there's no movie on him, and you don't have a statue of him in your garden, I would imagine, right? Does anybody have a statue of St. Dominic in your anywhere? See? Now, I'm a little bit biased, I must say, to St. Dominic because I was originally a Dominican. I was a Dominican seminarian for 4 years. So for those of you that go to Blessed Sacrament, the Newman Center and whatnot, I lived there, right, at Blessed Sacrament, and I hung out with the brethren and the whole thing. And I was a Dominican for 4 years before I transferred to the Archdiocese. So I had the nice habit and the kappa. It looked nice, right, the whole scene, the whole deal. So I'm a little bit, I have some preference to St. Dominic. And what St. Dominic wanted to do was not necessarily go and serve the poor and kind of, live in this particular community. What St. Dominic wanted to do out of Spain was to go and to be able to preach the gospel to all the different people, especially in the cities. So like what I'm doing right now, this is very Dominican, if you will, right? Going in a city, kind of a marketplace, preaching the gospel. And what St. Dominic wanted was guys to be very well educated so they could be great preachers of the word. And they could go about and preach the word, and the preaching of the word would convince people and convert people to come closer to Christ and the church. So much so that they used to wear what's known as a kappa. So I have the white habit, if you've seen the Dominicans with the white habit, right? Nice. And then there's this other piece known as the kappa, which is it's like a cape. Let's be honest, okay? It's a cape, right? So I had a cape at one point. Thank you very much, right? In religious life. That's how much I love Jesus. I had a cape, right? And so they would wear this cape over the top because they would sleep in it every night. That was the idea. They're just going to go from town to town and preach the gospel, and then at night they would use it as their blanket, and then it had a little hood, and then they would just roll up and then preach the gospel. Now, what I also like with both St. Francis and St. Dominic, and you know many of the general stories about both of them, I assume, is that they also were very much part of this human experience. For example, St. Francis is seen as one of the people that started what are known as the Stations of the Cross in a tangible way, because people couldn't go necessarily to Jerusalem to be able to go on the pilgrimage. So he's like, we want to offer this little Station of the Cross, right? So it's a really tangible thing you can go do physically and go from station to station. St. Francis as well, you may or may not know, also created the creche scene, right, with the little baby Jesus. And all of us take it for granted now, right? But that was around the time of the 1200s. He created the creche scene so that people could have this tangible reminder of what it meant for, Emmanuel to be with us and all these things. Very beautiful and specific things. St. Dominic had what's known as the 9 ways of prayer. I don't know if some of you are familiar with the 9 ways of prayer of St. Dominic. Look it up sometimes. It's pretty interesting stuff. But basically, he was talking about how do you use your body to help you pray. So some of the different ways of praying in the 9 ways of prayer, one is to just kneel, right? So in your room, you can just kneel. Another way was to walk. So St. Dominic, they'd walk town to town. He would hang out with the brothers sometimes, but then sometimes he'd just hang back and be like, it's all right. I'll just kind of walk and meditate on the Lord, right, for a little bit. Let them do their thing. He would lie prostrate. One of the 9 ways of prayer is studying theology, right? So it's not seen as a separate type of thing. Both of them very tangible, like this is what it means to be human, right? And this is how you can incorporate your spirituality into your humanity. It's a great blessing that we've had because obviously they founded the Franciscans and Dominicans, which we still have to this day. They're some of the largest religious orders in the world. And both of them were looking at a situation and they thought to themselves, how can we do this better? How can we preach the gospel better? How can we evangelize better? How can we invite people to conversion and the experience of the risen Christ? And so they thought, well, we can't just be monk. That's not going to work. And the diocesan priests, some are okay, some maybe so-so. And so we need special people that are just going to offer their lives for the poor. We need special people that are just going to come together and preach the gospel. And so they started new orders, which took an immense amount of courage, right? So imagine if one of you all of a sudden today was like, I'm going to start a new religious order tomorrow, right? Amongst all of you that are gathered here this evening, you're like, I got the idea. I'm going to start a new religious order tomorrow. And then your vision was so compelling that other people started to gather around you and be like, yeah, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to carry out the mission of evangelization. You got to imagine the types of resources you would need to provide, the type of organizational structure that would have to happen. They had to be approved by the Pope. They had all sorts of different challenges that would have stopped them from doing this. But both of them, inspired about the same time, went and started these new religious orders to be able to provide evangelization in a new way. Last little story with St. Dominic and St. Francis is there's this legendary, you were at that class I taught the other day, and so there's this legendary, have you ever seen the painting of where St. Francis and St. Dominic are meeting each other? Have you ever seen this painting? So supposedly they met at one point in Rome, which is probably likely because they were contemporaries of each other. And they met, and so there's this painting where like the two of them are embracing, kind of like there's little halos, the whole thing. And so when I was a Dominican and then Franciscans, whenever we'd see each other, we'd be like, quick, someone paint this right here. But they knew each other because they founded these mendicant orders, which are supposed to be orders that were based on a life of common prayer, but then they would be sent out to different missions, either to preach the gospel or to take care of the poor, right? But very creative, very inspired by the Holy Spirit, and we see that even now, 800 years later. Now, that's phase one, everybody. There's only two phases, right? Second phase is the new evangelization. So I mentioned before the joy of the gospel. Pope Francis has been carrying forth, after the Synod of Bishops met in about 2012 or so, they put out a document on the new evangelization. You probably heard this term before, I hope and I trust, right? And so the joy of the gospel was Pope Francis's pastoral application of the Synod discussion that had happened before with all the cardinals and the bishops in Rome. And if you have not read it, I would encourage you to do so, or at least parts of it. You can find it, on the USCCB or on the Vatican webpage. You can download it. It's right there. And it is written in such a way that is very easy to understand and apply to your own life. The kind of summary of what Pope Francis is saying is, we need to do it in a new way. And we need to do it better than we're currently doing. And what's the what? Evangelizing. So I was even thinking, I was like, well, this is the embodiment of the new evangelization, standing here in the chieftain, right? And people are wandering around. I'm up here like, who wants to love Jesus? That kind of thing. But basically, that's the summary. What Pope Francis is talking about. He's like, one of the, and I'll just give you a number of, kind of lines and quotes from it. One of them is, he says, we cannot just do things the way we've always done them and just assume that that's good enough. Because we're in a new reality right now. And you, as young adults, for example, you are on the forefront of that new reality. And he goes on to talk about what is the new reality. It's the postmodern secular culture that we currently live in the West. That's what he's talking about. Okay? And to give a little definition of what that means, postmodern, the pre-modern era was the idea of time of St. Francis, St. Dominic, medieval times, etc., where all truth came from the church. The modern era, which comes from the Enlightenment up until about, I would say, probably World War II, is all about, our human reason and science will figure out all the things we need to figure out, right? That's the modern era. The postmodern era is religion isn't good, that's not going to answer it. Science and even our own intellect and, democratic politics, that's not going to answer it either. So there's no universal truth. We just have to figure everything out on our own. And the only real truth comes from my own personal experience, right? And my own personal freedom. Everybody with me? Postmodern reality. Okay, so that's the postmodern piece. The secular culture is the idea that there's a radical break between faith and how we live our day-to-day life, basically. And so much so that we see that played out in various political things. We're not going to get into any hot topics here this evening. right? But you see that played out where it's like there's a total isolation of people's faith. And it's okay for people to have their own privatized faith, right? Oh, you're Catholic, you're Lutheran, whatever, that's all fine, no problem. But don't bring that into the public sphere, right? Don't bring that in for the common discussion. Pope Francis goes on to say, well, we're living in this particular culture right now, and that we need to do something different and new. What we're doing, our normal kind of maintenance of various ministries and even parishes and schools, it's good. I'm not here to say it's not good, right? That's all good. But we need to be great, right, in what we're doing. Because if we just do things as we normally do them, kind of good, average, we kind of take care of Catholics that come to us, there's no way we're going to reach people that are living in the postmodern secular culture. Because our faith is not offering them any answers or any meaning in their lives. And they're saying, well, what's the difference? You know, my own experience pastorally, I used to serve as the pastor out in Issaquah, as I mentioned. And we got a lot of wealthy people out there. Issaquah, collections were good. I got lots of REI gift cards when I was the pastor at Issaquah, right? Because they knew I mountain bike and hike and so all the time. And I would just show up to REI with like 20. Which one do you want, right? And they're like, who are you? I was like, I'm the priest here. But people are very wealthy. They have lots of resources. I'm not saying everybody, but many do, right, that are living kind of in this kind of urban Seattle area. And in my experience pastorally is that a lot of people are not against the gospel or faith. They're just apathetic. They've just formed different habits. They do different things. On Sunday, when they might go to church, they go hiking, or they walk their dog, or they whatever. And that's what they do. And they're not bad people, right? A lot of them are your siblings and mine, right? They're your friends, people you work with and mine that maybe were raised Catholic or not. And they just kind of drift away, because part of it is, and the question they bring is, if I go to church and I believe, how is my life going to be any different or better? Right? How's it going to be any better? What's the difference? Right? I mean, I'm already living this life. I already got to commute through traffic on 405 and I-5, and I work at Microsoft or Amazon or whatever. And I have some resources. I have some friends I hang out with, and we do things, and I try to be a good person, and it's fun. So how is my life going to be better or different? What Pope Francis is talking about with the new evangelization is he's saying we have to meet people in their lived experience. And he talks a lot about accompaniment. Okay, I got to meet you where you're at and kind of journey with you. And it might take time. And the time that I invest in our relationship, our fundamental relationship, is going to build enough trust so that you're willing to ask a question or come to church or whatever, or come back to church. You name it. Pope Francis has this great line in there where he says, no one's going to believe the gospel from people that are dejected and upset and angry. But people are going to believe the gospel from people that are filled with joy. Hence the whole thing is called the joy of the gospel, right? Joy, hope, love, energy, all these things, right? When people encounter that, then they're like, well, that looks pretty good, right? I mean, I put that even in the context of promoting vocations. The greatest thing that'll help me promote vocations is if someone meets a joyful priest, right? I can give all sorts of talks and, workshops and offer resources, whatever, but if somebody meets a joyful priest, it looks like, hey, that looks pretty good. Then they're like, yeah, maybe, right? It's the same with our experience. If people don't encounter us as people that are transformed in the faith, that are filled with joy, and I'm not talking about some sort of faulty joy where you're just like, hi, everything's good, it's Monday at work, not that, right? I'm talking about an underlying sense of peace and joy, right, that comes from our relationship with the Lord, that gives our lives meaning and purpose, that gives us a sense of surety in what we're being called to do and how we're being called to love and serve. That's what we're called to offer to the life of the world. I was just thinking about, I went to public high school here in the Seattle area, and then I went to Western for my undergraduate degree. I don't know if we have any Western alumni that are here too. Yes, Vikings, as it is. I love Bellingham. It was a great place. Not very churchy up there in the Hammer, right? And so I have all sorts of friends from public school experiences that are Christian. A lot of my friends that don't go to church at all. No church, right? Etc. All sorts of different friends of theirs that I know, or their spouses that come from different backgrounds. And of course, they know I'm a priest now, right, in general. So I'm like, hey, how's it going? How's my buddy? He's a priest. And it's kind of a nice novelty act for some of them, too. Like, I can't believe we're friends, dude, and you're a priest. It's true, right? But part of the way that I approach them, and part of what Pope Francis is talking about, is I don't, when I hang out with them, right, your friends, your coworkers, your family members maybe don't go to church, I don't hang out with them and just start preaching theology at them or catechism, right? I hang out with them as friends and share their lives, and then from that basis, and this is what Pope Francis gets into great detail about, from the basis of us sharing our lives together and having patience, then from that can come the fruits of the Spirit, right? And we can then have the opportunity perhaps to invite someone in a deeper relationship with the risen Christ. You know, when you think about the connection, if you will, if you haven't quite made it, St. Francis and St. Dominic, they were sitting in a particular time and culture, and they were like, we got to do something new. We got to think outside the box, right? What we're doing is okay, but we got to come up with some creative ideas, right? Something new. Right now, Pope Francis is saying, not just to me as a priest or Archbishop Sarton, he's saying to the entire church, we got to do something new. We got to think outside the box in some new way about how we're going to be able to spread the gospel, about how we're going to try to meet people where they're at and invite them into deeper relationship. You know, one of the best examples of that today, I would say kind of on the larger institutional church, is Father Robert Barron. And I don't know if some of you are familiar with his stuff. No, some people. Check out the webpage Word on Fire. He's the rector at Mundelein Seminary, and he offers all sorts of little YouTube videos, and he's written great theology books, spirituality books. And basically what he does is he tries to start with the culture, right? So he'll give like a little YouTube clip on like the Hunger Games or something, right? Which is out, some movie or the book. So he'll start with the culture, where people are at, and then he'll extrapolate the themes or the dynamics of the Christian lifestyle that are found in this very secular kind of modern experience, and try to bridge people from the culture to their faith. And that's part of what we're called to do together in the life of the church. And do not just assume, well, don't worry, we got this guy, and you're pointing at me, he'll take care of it all, right? Look, he's the priest, he's the vocation director, he'll talk on new evangelization, it'll all be cared for, right? It's all good. It's our work together, right? To figure out new ways, new structures about how we can invite people in. I would also go on to say, and just give a little shout out to the team over here, that things like this, Theology on Tap, are a very good example of like the new evangelization. Because you're trying to meet people a little bit where they're at. People go for after work, they'll go for happy hour or something. That's kind of what this is, right? And so we're like, hey, the church is going to come to you, right? And it doesn't have to be the official minister of the church, but all of us are called to reach out to people to be able to spread the gospel. As I like to say in the context of new evangelization, is that we're never called to impose the gospel, right? We're never called to impose it. Much like my Southern Baptist grandmother that used to ask me, like, are you saved, right? Have you accepted Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior? And I was like, easy, Grandma, easy, right? Right? I mean, I was baptized, I'm Catholic, I'm sure it's working itself out, right? We're never called to impose the gospel. That's not our role. But what we are called to do is propose the gospel, right? To be able to bring up an invitation to all those people that we meet, those that perhaps were part of the church but are no longer practicing, even those that come for Christmas and Easter, which I like to call Creasters, right? They come for Christmas and Easter, which is nice. We're happy they're there. We want them to have a good experience and hopefully come back for more. As well as our other Christian brothers and sisters, so they understand why we believe what we believe. As well as other people that don't have any faith background, right? Are starting from zero. And we're called to be bold and creative in doing this endeavor together. And to come up with new ideas about how we can do it. I always used to encourage, like both when I was in Issaquah in different parishes, to make sure there's at least one youth or young adult on a pastoral council or whatever, right? So that somebody's thinking outside the box. Not just necessarily, well, who are we taking care of that comes to our parish? Which is good. That's fine, right? It's a good thing to do, provide formation. But how are we reaching out to people that are on the periphery, right? Those that we don't see all the time. I'm just going to give you a couple last little examples of the new evangelization, possible models, and then we're going to give you some discussion questions. So just like St. Francis, and St. Dominic, created new religious orders to be able to preach in a new way. Pope Francis is asking us to create new structures in the life of the church is going to help us to evangelize, right? Invite people in. Two things that I did when I was in Issaquah that seemed to be pretty effective. One, they had some transition there before I got there. The pastor hadn't been there for like 9 months, and there was lots of turmoil. And also, I came in to be like, it's going to be okay, everybody, right? We're all here. It's all right. But I knew there was a lot of hurt and whatever, so I took the parish list, right? You know the parish register? You know, they got everybody's on there. There was like 1,000 families on it. And I just started calling families. How you doing? I'm the new pastor at the parish. What's going on? And I would call them. And a lot of people, I would just call them to check in on them and be like, you know, have I met you at Mass before? I don't know, I'm new here. Would you like to come? At some point say hello. Do you have any sacramental needs? Is your kid enrolled in the school? Is our information updated? Whatever. But keep in mind, I called them. And I wasn't asking for money. Right? I wasn't calling them because we're, building a new gym or whatever. I called them just to passionately check in on them and be like, would you like to come? Right? And all I did was make an invitation. Now, this is easy pickings because they're already on the list. Right? On some level, at least they registered when they got baptized, the person got baptized, who knows? And from that endeavor, I ended up calling about 800 households over about 3 years, right? And I would just call in the evening time to try, so I could actually reach somebody, that sort of thing. I actually had a couple people answer the phone, and they were like, who's this? I was like, I'm Father Bryan, I'm the priest over at the parish. And they were like, hold on, I got something burning on the stove. I'm so shocked that you called me. Here it is, right? And they're going to go over. Because they were like, is the priest calling me right now? I was like, yeah, just call and check in. Say hello, how you doing? But from that endeavor, there was a number of people already registered. I saw them at the parish, etc. A number of people, of course, had moved on different places, so that was helpful, so we could update our list and better stewardship, etc. And then a number of people came back to the parish because I called them and I invited them. Easy, right? Easy invitation. All of you should be thinking, just in the context of what can you do in your own life, kind of promote new evangelization. Is there one person that you can invite to Mass that you could think of right now? That you know from somewhere. Either they're raised Catholic or they're not, or somebody, whatever, from either work or family or something. One person in your own mind, you're like, you know what? I can invite that person to Mass, And if they say no, it's okay, right? You don't have to force it on and be like, I failed. Well, forget the new evangelization, right? I'm out of here, right? Right? This is long range, right? Evangelization. And then the other piece that I was going to do, and my pastoral staff and pastoral council was very happy when I got moved to my new position, because we were going to do a parish census. Have any of you ever seen this, parish census? So this is what happens. You go out 2 by 2 and you go door to door to every single house in your parish boundary. Yeah, there were a lot of parishioners that did not want to do that. And I was like, that's what we're going to do, everybody, because there's a lot of non-practicing Catholics here in the Issaquah area, and then maybe we'll find some other people, invite them in, the whole thing. I was like, we're going to go out 2 by 2, and we're going to divvy up the parish, the whole thing, we're going to go out. And many of you are thinking, like, when I was there, you're thinking of like a Mormon coming to your door, right, or something, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be like that. No. All you're trying to do with the parish census is go out and just gather information and make an invitation to people and be like, well, if there's anything you'd like, come on by. If you're raised Catholic, would you like to come for Mass? You want any kids to be baptized? We're just saying hello because we're your neighbors. That's it. No hard sell, right? Just have to tell one other little story. When I was in Issaquah there, I had this little house just up above the parish, and knock on my door Sunday afternoon. I'm back from Mass. And who's there? Jehovah's Witness, right? They're at my door. And I was dressed just like this. And I opened up the door and I was like, hey, how you doing? They're like, good, we're from Jehovah's Witness. Here's some stuff, whatever. And I was like, I'm the priest. Like, right there, like at that parish. And they were like, so here's some stuff, right? Here's some things to read or whatever. There was no sense of like dialogue, right? Like we're just trying to be neighbors here, right? We're just trying to be friends, and like kind of from that relationship, we can build, right, to some other sense of like inviting someone to the risen Christ. And that's what I wanted to do in the parish, but then I got moved right before we were about to start it. And my pastoral staff was like, oh, praise the Lord, we don't have to go do that and make that happen. Because they just like to kind of stay in-house, which is fine. We need that as well. But we're also called to go out beyond the church and reach people on the margins, those that don't believe, those that are poor, that can't come on their own, those that are in need. We are called to bring Christ to the world. That's basically what Pope Francis has to do. And he's saying we can't do it in the same way we've always been doing it. We got to come up with new ways, and everybody's called to it, and we need to be joyful. And Pope Francis is a great example of the new evangelization, just even in himself. How many of you have had somebody come up to you because they know you're Catholic, like, how about that new Pope? You know what I'm saying, right? How about that guy? That's all right, right? We can get into that. Why? Because he packages it in a nice way. He hasn't said anything the church hasn't believed, right, for years and years. I mean, it's all the same stuff. But he packages it in a nice way, and he's joyful, right? He's approachable. That's what we're called to do, but just as St. Dominic and St. Francis, we're going to ask for their, intercession for us this evening. Just as they came up with new ideas that were radical in that time, right? To be able to preach the gospel, we're called to do the exact same thing here and now. You could go to some other country if you want, but there's plenty of work to be done here in the Archdiocese of Seattle, right? And to be able to spread the gospel together as the community of the faithful. All right, that's probably long enough for right now. So I think there's like a raffle drawing or something like that, and then there's questions after that. Do I get to choose the raffle drawing? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I look forward to that. Are you ready?
Okay. Let's do it.
Is that the next piece? Am I turning this back over to you, Tom?
Okay. Oh, yeah, I'll take it for 1 second.
Let's give it up for Father Bryan Dolesji.